Welcome to the Business AI Playbook podcast. Today we're joined by Zsolt Olah, Senior HR Data Measurement Analyst at Intel, who specializes in learning analytics and the impact of AI on corporate learning. With more than 20 years in L&D, including roles at Amazon and AWS, Zsolt has built his career at the crossroads of tech, data, and engagement. In this episode, we'll explore why scalable soft skills practice matters, how AI and data are transforming learning, and what's next for the future of workplace development. Thank you so much for being here once again. Much appreciate the presence, and I'm really excited by this topic. I think from a technology perspective, we will have just such a intriguing part, like how it started from theory and goes to practice now in the recent years, and how it will really be part of all business applications. So, if you could help us understand how you really got into this from your background's perspective and started interacting with simulations and how AI powers them, that would be great as a start.
Excellent. So I have a computer science background. This is my first sort of love with technology, data, programming, that kind of thing, back in ages ago before the internet. In fact, in 35 years ago, I built artificial neural network on a floppy disk. So it's absolutely useless today. Probably one line of code, but it was good enough to get a degree. But at the same time, for the last 20 years or so, I was more interested in the overlap between the human sort of interactions and lives and the technology side of things. And this is where like social simulations come in, practicing in the working environment of communication skills, leading anything around the little touchy-feely sort of but very important soft skills. And so when AI came along, and we can deep dive into of how and what the actual history was, but when AI came along, finally we had the scalability there, we had the options of actually delivering these, the efficiency was there, and now we can focus on the effectiveness part. And basically, with the pace of change, we can build whatever we want at this point. So it's an exciting time, and at the same time, I think we all have to be very, very careful about where we put our investments and money and resources. So it's a interesting time to see what we can do now, because we sort of removing the limitations that we used to have before.
And how has this sort of application evolved, or maybe even first of all, like, can you help us understand like a practical application or an example of like even a deployment today? Like, what are we actually talking about here, and what is the business impact and the user impact is driving?
Yeah, so what are we solving for? Today, I always look at things in sort of three categories in terms of measuring. So you have the efficiency part. How many resources do we need to create something? How well we use the resources. And then we have the effectiveness part of it. So did it get done what we wanted to get done? Do we actually achieve what we want? And then you have the outcome, which is more like the business value. And do we actually bring value to the table and showing the business that we're actually making a difference? And so when you combine those today, one of the hardest part to practice in a safe environment is, again, like the social skills. What in the last maybe 20 years or so we did in learning and development, especially the corporate world, they do need people to lead, they manage difficult conversations, talking with the team, communication skills, that kind of thing. So what we did, we tried our best to use the technology that was available and build this simulation so you can actually select the right thing to say. If you've been alive around the 2000 or so, they finally brought in these almost choose your adventure type of game-like experiences within the learning and development. So you can select what would you say, and you see the reaction, and then you select again, kind of like a branching scenario thing. The problem with those things is that it's really hard to build and maintain. It's a nightmare to change. And then it's not scalable, because we built maybe one or two of these scenarios. and that was our resources, and then we published them. That's not practical for a large scale organization. And so we started with that up until we got into maybe 2, 3 years ago when AI started and machine learning started to come in, big data, the power was behind it. Now we could build things like the LLMs pretending to be a person, so we didn't have to hard code those things and conversations. That was the starting point when we thought, okay, yes, it can hallucinate, it can do all kinds of things, but what it's really good at is actually pretending to be someone. And that was the starting point, I think, when we started thinking about how do we change and harvest that. Um, and as a practical application, it was only this February when I went to the conference and showed how you can, for example, interview people. So interviewing skills is another thing that it's great to have, but you don't want to practice on your real audience in your organization. So we did build a little bit of a mystery company where you went in and you had to interview people and find out what happened. And then at the end, based on a rubric that you were given up front, they would tell you how you're interviewed, followed the rules, your reactions and all that, but nothing was scripted in that. And we can dive later into of how it was done and what technology and what we could do to make that happen in a large scale. But it was the first time when we started implementing things where we have an idea of what we want, but we rely on those characters within the world. So we define the whole world, define the characters, and they interact with you, practicing your skills rather than just selecting something out of a multiple choice question.
And let's get back a bit to, I assume, like 22, like when the first LLMs came out, like more in a more advanced version. Like, what was your reaction back then? Did you immediately think of this use case, or do you recall those days? Like, did you feel like those were that was the first time you could really like feel like this could be innovated the way
I
you
think
simulated of it?
yeah, I remember the first couple of weeks with like ChatGPT kind of blew him up, the world, and everybody's trying to figure out what it is. I remember daily people posted on LinkedIn on research. I was like, look, this is what it can do. It can pretend to be a Linux system. It can pretend to be something else. So this pretending part was coming out, and then after that, you had like tons of loads of like write me a poem in the style of XYZ and that kind of thing. So I think we probably maybe a whole half a year or so we were playing with it as much as we could. It wasn't really the first time I was like, oh yeah, it would be great for a whole simulation type of thing. There was no really guardrails at that point behind it. Everybody prompted the way they wanted or they tried. Last year, actually, it was December 2023, the first time when I saw the gaming world um, putting something more tangible and thoughtful around it of what would be some sort of a framework for role play agents based on driving from the LLMs. But what is the thing that we need around them? What is the technology, the framework? So how does the memory work? How does our retrieval work? How do you make decisions and that sort of thing? That paper was, I think, the first time when I saw if we could take that and implement it in our L&D as part of a almost fictitious world when you create these actual almost living characters that aware of the environment, they know about each other just like real people. Then it would be excellent to create some sort of simulations around it. And the rest of it would be only like what is your need, what is your most common needs that you need to have for a simulation.
I talked with several of our customers at Colossyan, and they are deploying simulations as well, like powered by LLMs and all that. And I still remember one of the stories where a given customer told me that they deployed one of these experiences. I think it was even voice based in this case,
Mm-hmm.
and they just started the agent or the agent kind of started to ask questions around like the actual cybersecurity related topics, but people immediately it was like still in the early phases of the deployment with this technology started to ask about the weather, or random things, and guardrails weren't really present. I think it was like 1.5 years ago or something, 1 year ago. And what's your opinion, like in terms of implementation? Uh, can you implement it in such a way where you can put in guardrails in a way to steer the conversation more securely? Is the technology already there? Have you experienced other challenges in terms of like adoption as this even?
Yeah, so I remember the first couple of conversational attempt in the ed tech world. And when the conferences, they showed me a couple of things of what they do, and they basically implemented one type of conversation, and so you can practice that, or even early beta versions. And I remember one when I gave off because it told me that I'm taking too much time. And I was like, this is a hard conversation. Like people think, I'm not going to just say right away what I need to do and then just cut it off. And then at the end, they gave me a list of things what I did well, and it was just way off. So when we started, I think there was one big problem before the rack came along. So we didn't really have like a base of facts or guidance of what is the actual limitations of what you do. So don't just come up with a great answer about an FAQ. Tell me what our company in our environment would tell me about that, because you need to know the world itself. So once they started using that, before they sort of the answer would be very interesting and entertaining, but nothing to do with reality and the job. Now we can pull real information and check whether this is the right answer. And that's when I think we started seeing more of the guardrails built in. Do not, no, under no circumstances you can get out of your character and that kind of things, which again, maybe still, and humans probably will always game the system. But the point is that you can give them now enough guardrails and reality that there's expectations that you use it for what it is. Because I always say that it's not what you build, what the learning is, or what the delivery method is, that doesn't relate and transfer into learning and application. If you don't have the expectations at the end on the job that you're going to be able to do these things, that it doesn't matter what you give them, they can just play around. Just like role plays, like we always said role plays like humans. And if you ever done this in like a call center, after 10 minutes, everybody's just laughing and they come up with all kinds of things to talk about, like football. And so if you don't have the expectations and a clear guidance of you're doing this because it's good for you and you can practice, but then the expectation is that you know what to do and you're going to apply that on the job, then it doesn't really matter what sort of practice environment we create and safe environment.
That's true. That's so true. And um, where are we now in terms of technological adoption or readiness? Have you already seen KPIs that moved towards a positive direction thanks to the current advancement in this field, in a potential pilot deployments? Um, how are the business sort of results validations ongoing in this field?
So I always keep an eye on the game industry, because they're the professionals who always want to have much better much better experiences together than we do in like learning. We just pretend to build something even close to that resembles engaging, but they're the ones who do it professionally. And the NPCs, the characters that are not controlled by you as a player, but part of the world. There's always been a fascinating back and forth around how much of these is players, these non-NPCs, should be smart enough to come up with their own storyline, and or just say whatever they need to, so you can just go and do your job and play and achieve whatever you need to. So a couple of companies started, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago or so, built a system. InWorld is one of them. Convey AI is another. Where what they took is literally the same concept, that you build not just a character or an LLM that's going to talk to you, but you build a framework around what they need to have, which is, let's say, ground rules and truths about the world that they all know. So each character that you build, they have the same shared environment, the shared knowledge. So if you ask them about the sky, they all know that it's above it and it's blue. Obviously, in your organization, it would be maybe the history of the company or whatever. So they shared that. But at the same time, each of them have their own personality and personal knowledge, even just like humans, conceptions that may not be true. So, for example, perception of each other can be interesting as a concept in a team. So if you put this together for example, leading a team or driving, for example, innovation when everybody on the team, 4 or 5 people, are very strong, opinionated, and really, really creative, and you're the one who tried to drive them into one direction, you're not going to solve this problem by individually talking to each one of them and have a conversation or a practice. It's a team now. They all have a common goal, but they all connect with each other, interact with each other. So again, these were I think the first sort of real builds that were somewhat scalable, not just a prototype that you build and then now you show me, whoa, in 5 years we can get there. And it also included, again, these very important pieces of the world itself that you can share as information, ground truth, the personal knowledge itself. And then memory was I think the last piece that was coming in. Because if I talk to you now and next week I run into you again, we're not starting the conversation from scratch again. We have a common history. You remember what I told you, I remember how you reacted. The same way, these characters need to remember and retrieve that information, retrieve that memory they had. And then the last piece of it, if you really want to make sure that these are real humans, like people forget. In fact, our retrieval process, the memory, is not just simple recording and then recall it. We actually construct what we learned and all the things that happen between and emotions and all that. It may not be the exact memory that happened. So if you put all these together, now you have a real case of, let's say, leading a team in the first 6 months. Then you have real people to talk to, almost close to what you would get for like an actor environment when you have real humans.
I'm hearing from you that we are crossing so many of these boundaries that that were blocked by technology, but finally technology got where we wanted it to be. What are the like? Am I reading correctly that the major value for companies to deploy such simulations in this case is cost saving potentially, like that they can do this more effectively, and also maybe reducing time for the learners because they can learn a certain practice, certain skill much more effectively rather than like longer experiences that were more monotone previously. Am I reading this correctly, or what do you think are the major promises one can promise this kind of evolution?
Yeah, so I think let's go back to the 3 things that you always look at,
Mhm.
because if you only focus on one part, it can be misleading. So if you only focus on cost, for example, then you would never build anything, because everything that you build is expensive. Like, hey, let's just reduce it. And this is why we never had, for example, I think, good, real serious games in the industry, learning industry, is because it actually takes a lot of time and a lot of money to build those to be good. And by the time you would build them, they might not need them, move on. And that's not really sustainable. So yes, the one part was definitely that now it is much more efficient that you can build these, mostly because you're building an engine and you're not hard coding one simple, topic, which again would be used once or twice. Now you can build a whole concept and engine and you just feed them in different situations. That's one. But it's more, I think, for me about the effectiveness, because the problem with soft skills, and again, it's not just I really like soft skills, so we should put this on the radar and try that. Even if you look at the World Economic Forum, skills, future skills. There's the technology side of things, but also one of the top 5. You have all the soft skills of critical thinking, creativity and all that. Now, you can argue that those are not really skills, but more like wishful concepts, but they do need practice. That's the whole point. And what I think we did wrong generally in the industry is that we took these soft skills and created training about them. So you go somewhere and learn about communication. You go and learn about critical thinking. And then you go back to work and do your job and try to figure out how to connect. Because you're not actually learning how to do your job while you're a good communicator or selling someone using negotiation skills. You learn the two separately. But now we can involve and build something almost in the flow of how you work. I don't want to use the work through learning because whatever it was, it's been out there for a long time. It wasn't very popular to build, but now you can do it because you don't have the technology barrier. You can create simulations. Like imagine now with agents actually tipping into your internal system, not just somewhere go in like a learning management system and pretend to be somewhere as a conversation, but you are talking to, for example, a customer, and that customer, that agent, through the new MCP servers, let's say, have actual connections to your ticketing system. So in real time, they can see what kind of complaints are coming in from real customers. And that's what you're practicing. Or maybe it's about the sales agents who need to learn how to get over objections and from their Salesforce system, take the information of real companies and then put them into the situations that actually applicable for them in their time of the year, because I don't know, Christmas coming up or whatever. And then it's relatable, it's effective because you're doing your job technically. You're not learning something separately and then apply that. And then the outcome is definitely what we need to measure, because if all this is not leading to some sort of ROI in the sales, it's easy because they're measuring growth, whatever the time KPIs are that you have to move. If they're not selling more, then it's not worth it. But if they do, then you can look around and say, how do we, expand this? How do we integrate it into the flow of work with the technology?
And what are the current complexities of deployment? Like enterprise security comes that like when you connect to all these knowledge sources and knowledge bases comes to my mind first. Like basically AI adoption with major enterprises is still a struggle. It's still like being still being resolved as a new challenge, right? Is that a right intuition, or there are even greater complexities of deployment today other than enterprise security?
Yeah, I mean, even if you just look at the LLM use internally, officially, it seems like the corporations, and I don't know about the whole world, but talking to similar companies. I work for Intel, very technology-driven company. Before that, I worked for Amazon. Um, Literally working on data and technology day by day, and yet internally they were sort of behind catching up because it's the pace of change outside what I call like the playground world. It's so fast that the original operation flow of procurement and IT and data security and data privacy and legal, by the time all of these groups go through and understand and work together of what is allowed and what not, people still using more the open version of these LLMs and then put the results into work because it's just actually better, faster, easier. Now, you can let this happen and then pretend that you're safe internally, or you can think about how to make sure that you have the guardrails to use, because people will go around, I guess, the guardrails internally. That's one. I think the second part is I've seen in now many organizations is that there's this grassroots. The bigger your organization, the more individual sort of group applications pop up like mushrooms. each org is trying to solve their own AI problems with some sort of AI application, but without having a general strategy and all the guardrails from the company, then you end up with almost like a technical debt because everybody's building their own things. They don't talk to each other, which again, back in the days of the internet happened, but now it's more like so much faster because of the AI technology. So yes, it is still um, a, a challenge. It depends on, I think, how and who comes together to form some sort of guardrails and policies, and then within that, innovate internally. A lot of people I've seen, implement their own version of that. So you can take the open source, do it internally, so you have some sort of um, source of that you can use internally in AI. The problem is that the more detached you get from the outside world, the harder it is to upgrade things internally. Because the moment it's like forking, go to GitHub, fork something, and you start changing it, it's kind of hard to go back again. It's like, what are they doing now? And that's not my area. This is, I think, not a single person. Not one person is going to solve this. This is really a group of people need to work together, including HR, including technology, including sales, because you need to have those people who are really good at the soft skills, by the way, and work together. Not just the technology part. It's not a technology problem. If you treat it as a technology problem and you put guardrails around that, people are going to go around it because they just don't feel like they're having the same impact as they would outside of the real tools.
Absolutely. And in terms of there's just so many great thoughts there. So thanks so much for sharing them so far. I believe the audience will enjoy them a lot. But in terms of implementation, are there any objections normally internally against like implementing this? Or we talked about some of the complexities of deployment, but does anything else come to your mind in terms of like difficulties of implementation? Because what I'm hearing is technologically it just became already so much easier. Do any further difficulties or learnings come to your mind like others should know about?
So yeah, there is a technology side of things because it's unknown. And again, if you build something that's not hard coded like the old days of learning, you cannot control what people see exactly. But that doesn't mean that you should not build something like that and then put the guardrails again around it when people can report things if anything happened. So I always call this like, the two ways of looking at security. One is like our TSA, and then was like court of law. In the TSA, everybody is guilty until proven not guilty. So everybody has to go through the airport machine until like, hey, I'm not having anything on me I'm not supposed to. There's no excuse for that. In the court of law, you're innocent until you're proven guilty with the whole thing. So I think somewhere in between is when we need to implement these so we can start innovating and building things, not stifling down until everybody goes through and way behind. But the other side of things, that's the technology side of things and data. The other side of things is still more about how we think about learning within L&D and in the corporate world. That needs to change. It is, I think, no longer sustainable that we are there to create courses and training when some stakeholder comes and says we need training. Today, AI can build from content to content for whatever form in minutes or maybe overnight if there's a lot of thinking involved, not weeks and months with humans. So our strength is not how fast we create content and put in the elements. Measurement needs to come in, and this is where the data guy comes in, that until we start measuring whether we're really helping people to do their job better, easier, faster, and does that actually result in some sort of financial ROI or intangible benefits that we want, then we just end up with content tossing. And that's, AI is much, much better for that than humans. So you need to change first the thinking about who you are as an LD organization, as an enablement function. What is your responsibility? What is your accountability? How do you help people get things on the job? And then you can go back and say, if if this is so important that the managers needs to learn how to manage, is our approach today, which is a course somewhere, and maybe good practice with it, is this the most effective way of doing things
That's
or
such a
not?
great such a great takeaway. Um, in terms of the next steps for this technology, AI-based simulations, what do you predict? What's going to happen over the next year or 2 years? Like, how more advanced could this become?
Well, if I knew, probably I would have all the stocks lined up and be a millionaire of what
What
company
are
would
your
I?
what are your big bets overall,
um,
or hope? Like, what's not working well today, and you still want to be improved,
yeah.
or missing parts?
So my bold prediction is that within a couple of years, but even by next year, we should be able to see. Um, this year, I went to three conferences where I spoke, and so I talked to the vendors. I looked at the lineup down at the expo, and you can already see that almost every decent technology brings in some sort of AI additional. Now, what's behind the scene, sometimes you're not sure, but you could see that there are, for example, dedicated now for social simulations to practice through AI. So there's already technology that you can buy today as a company, as long as you work out all the details with them. So they're already delivering something. But I think where this is going, keeping up with the pace of technology and pace, is that they're going to be somehow able to integrate closer to what you actually do on the job. So I don't really want another technology layer somewhere, one more ecosystem component that does X, Y, Z. And I go to another one and you can practice things there. And then now you go to the third one and that's going to tell you about how to work with, Ivory customers. That's not going to work individually with each system.
Exactly, because I'm also seeing that so many of LMSs or certain other types of systems introduce their own simulation um, solution. But are you predicting more of a general coach here being implemented or something like that?
Um, that was, I think, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when I worked at AWS, and I wanted to build my own twin, so I don't have to go to meetings. My digital twin that would just show up, take notes, and come back. Today, you have that because you can have any of the AI companions now just literally taking notes. What's missing, though, the last link is that they make decisions on your behalf and act. And this is where I think changing, maybe even just from last year to this year, I use a lot of ID tools like Windsurf. So now I can actually connect with Figma directly through the MCP server and take my design, and with 2 lines of code, it comes back and actually creates that inside as a code. So I don't have to recreate that in somewhere else or go through all the 7, 8 steps to bring it back to somewhere else when we can code it. That's, I think, where I'm hoping we're getting into when each of these technological involvement includes some sort of connection layer, the APIs, the understanding each other. So finally, I cannot go to meetings. I can just send my twin, connect to people that need to, they make a decision, and if they don't know what to do, come back and ask me. But that's, I think, where I would love to see the social simulation side of things too, is that not individual technology that we have in the corporation come up with some sort of approach, but at least we have an understanding of how these talk to each other, what is the language that they have, and then involve it in the job line that I'm doing day by day. That's my wish. And again, I expect a lot more around this of how to integrate these things with your own work rather than each system, buy my system and you get something with it.
Mm. Indeed, the interconnection here is important, and it relates to the security aspect we discussed as well. I think this is going to be like a great challenge, and I know personally working with these systems, like how hard it is sometimes to provide like even security barriers within the knowledge if you give access to like an entire, let's say, data lake. I think this is going to be a great challenge, but I like the vision. I think we are definitely progressing towards there. Um, Thank you so much overall for the conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I think there were some major takeaways which we will have to digest and think about for a while. What kind of resources would you recommend for others to follow in case they want to learn more about the applications or just the technical bits about the whole topic?
Yeah, so I think if you're interested in playing with this, because again, I don't think that people jump from 0 to 1 with this technology. And if you're not a decision maker anyway, you have to come up with some sort of prototype and show like, hey, this is what we could do if we went that way. I definitely suggest having some of the today available playground, even free. But if you invest some, maybe 20 something dollars a month, you can actually build something decent for a prototype. So the two things that I played with, one was InWorld, which again I told you is heavily used now in games, but they went into more of the enterprise side of things. So this is not probably a good start at this point. But the other implementation, Convey AI, is an interesting one because you can build your own LLM-based characters, but then you can build a world around them, and they specially designed for learning because you can also build almost like a storyline inside and connect it to some sort of front end. So if you build games and you have like maybe Unity or Unreal Engine, like a hardcore game, then they have plugins for that. So now you can just bring them in. I used in my example just a simple approach, Play Canvas, and that has also a plugin that you can start with, so you don't have to start from scratch and start building something and play around. Just pick one problem that you try to solve for. You don't have to be anything secure and data-wise any propriety, but start with something to show that if I have the resources with my brain, enthusiasm, and expertise of this is what we could do. And this, I think, just like VR, which is a whole nother story, probably have guests on those two. It's really hard to sell VR because all we see is people have boxes on their heads and they're walking around. That's not really, a sexy way of selling something. But once you put that thing on and you start practicing and playing, then you see it like it's a different world. It's the same with our simulation. Talking about it like me talking about simulations and actually interacting with characters, it's like, yeah, okay, fine. But once you start and they're talking back to you and you respond and it feels like a real conversation, that's when I think it happens. That's when your prototype can trigger more internal, I think, um, evolution, and then you can maybe convince someone internally to put it into practice.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing those details, and I fully agree with you. Definitely, visually and practically, it's so much better to experiment and to experiment. Like Mark Ramos was here previously as a guest, and he kept saying that all you need to do is just start experimenting and trialing and failing fast with these experiments to learn about the actual use case and iterations. I definitely have the same view there. Where can people follow your work?
LinkedIn is probably a good one to find me. And the next thing coming up, there's a data literacy virtual by ATD, when I'm going to actually put something together that built by AI and me, but mostly AI, to learn data literacy as part of a team challenge. So if you sign up for that, you can experiment with what I built. And next one is DevLearn, where we actually have a whole day on AI, a more broad approach. And then I'm going to bring for people who may be interested in getting into AI, but they're not programmers, not data people, not professionals. I've run a lineup of things of what they can do now, technology tools, and some of the best practices. So DevLearn is the next one in November.
Much appreciate that, Joel. Thank you. And thanks for being such a fantastic guest today. I can't wait to create your virtual twin with Colossyan's conversation avatar that is launching soon. I definitely would love to try it and see whether it could work in any ways, as you mentioned. But overall, your knowledge in this field is just simply fascinating to me. And thank you so much for sharing your learnings. Keen to follow the work and see where this whole field is heading.